Everyone. Thanks for stopping by. Today I'm just going to be playing with this little pine cone. This is one I did previously for the short. You might have seen. And it's a lot of fun. It's not as difficult as it seems, maybe when you look at it like this. I gave you a link to the little pine cone. And for me, it always helps to see the shape. So right off the bat, I see all these little kind of wide triangles and then just C strokes going in towards the center of the pine cone, which, like a flower, like anything growing really, always to have in mind where the center part of your object is, and everything leads back to that. So as we get down near the bottom, they're going to be leading that way. If you remember with my flower tutorials, I have those guidelines that go out. This would be the same type of thing. So I hope that's helpful for you. And we're going to go ahead and paint in my very favorite style, which is I love layers. And I just think that's really the gift and the beauty in watercolors is using layers, because every time you put another layer on, you can still see the bottom layers coming through, and the layers all combine to make just some really beautiful hues and colors. So that's one of the things I really like. And we're also going to be playing not only with layers, but those layers are going to be built up using different values. So a light value, a mid value, and then the darkest value. I did for the short, as you know, I love my Artisto pads. This is my fall book. And forever I will come back and I will just grab this little ring binder. I will look, and all my fall inspiration and notes and things are in here. That's why I love these little pads. They're a great student pad. The texture, they take a lot of water, and they're fairly reasonable. I'm not affiliated with them. I just like them, and I think they're a great option to arches. If you can afford to use arches, by all means use them. They are a great paper. I just recently found the larger size Artisto pads. These are the same 140-pound cold press, but they're larger, and I'm really enjoying those for these tutorials as well. So that's what I'm painting on today. I've went ahead and used some carbon paper. I don't usually use carbon paper because you can't erase the lines. And they're a little bit darker, but for the tutorials, it allows you guys to see the lines better. So that's why I'm using that. So let's go ahead and start. I'm going to use both my, let's see, where is my 8-round Velvet Touch, which I love because the handle's so nice and soft. So this is the 8-round Velvet Touch Princeton brush. And for me, that's just my go-to brush. And lately, I've been using the 6 long round quite a bit. Even though the 8 round has a great point, this seems to me to have a little bit finer point. So I'm sure you have your favorite brush as well, and I'll link both of those for you. So those are going to be what I'm going to use today. I also use my MeiLang paints for decades. I've been a Winsor Newton user. But they're a little pricier, and I'm doing a lot of painting right now. So I've been using these MeiLang student grade paints for several months, and I love them. The colors are vibrant, they're creamy. You have so many mixed colors to choose from. So that's what I'm using today. Although just recently I invested in their larger set just because it has some of the metallics in it. So I may add some metallics today. We'll see how far we get, but let's go ahead and get started with our original wash. So I'm going to use, let me grab my painting here. So I'm going to use this kind of mix of yellow ochre in Winsor Newton, and it also happens to be that for the MeiLang paints. And we're going to make it quite watery. So it's, as always referred to, that tea consistency. It moves. It's got about 90% water, 10% pigment. And yellow ochre can be quite intense. So just be a little bit careful with that. So what I'm going to use this for is all the little tips, the little triangles of my pine cone. And I'm going to try to do my best to leave some little white spaces in those tips. So using the point of my brush and resting my hand on my paper, because I don't have, you guys, that steady of a hand, not for any medical reasons or anything, but I just don't. So using the tip of my brush, just going in, not getting too nitpicky here. I'm just really coloring each of these, just splashing some color on them randomly, making sure I do use, or I'm sorry, leave some of that white space just for interest. I know that's a challenge for a lot of you. I hear that all the time. Just practice doing it. It's interesting. We always want to fill in every little space, don't we? But you can leave some white space and just practice it. I'm using a lot of the tip of my brush because I want to get more detail. And when I want to use the tip of my brush, I hold my brush more vertical so I can activate the tip, because the more slant you are, you're going to activate a wider brush stroke because you're using the belly of the brush versus the tip, or the toe as they call it. So I'm about done here. As you can see, I didn't get real picky. I just kind of made sure I did leave that white space as I talked about. All right, so that's pretty good. You can see the general shape is like an egg, or to me, for some reason, it always, I always like seeing the shape of things. By the way, I didn't mention, I do share these a lot because I think they're a great option for a beginner that doesn't want to pay maybe $8 to $20 for a brush. Maybe you're not sure yet if you're even going to like watercolors. So this Degado set, you get a number of them. They're all round, so you get a choice and you can decide what size you like. And they're very reasonable. I think they're under $15 and you get a whole set. And I've been very, very pleased with how well they hold the tip, and they're very springy, which I like that. That's just a preference thing. Neptune brushes in Princeton can tend to be a lot softer, hold more water. I like the springiness of the Velvet Touch and the Degados. That's just what works for me. But those Degados are a great choice for you if you don't, you're not ready to invest on this Velvet Touch. Okay, so let's go in now with our second shading. All right, so we want to paint the maybe mid values underneath. So I'm going to use, I think I'm going to use, in MeiLiang, it's called Van Dyke Brown. And in your Winsor Newtons, they could be called Burnt Sienna. Actually, Burnt Sienna is a little bit dark. Burnt Umber, something like that. And I'm just going to go in now because I'm painting a little bit larger brush stroke, a larger area. I am going to slant my brush just a tiny bit, and I will use a little bit of the side of my brush. To get into the corner, I'm going to use the tip. Point, and then I'm just going to go down. And again, I'm not being real picky here. I'm using quite a watered down version still. And I'm just going to start making all my brush strokes leading into the center of my pine cone. like that. And then we'll go in and put in our dark values. So don't get too picky. You can even leave, you know, some white in here. I don't freak out over things. I'm just painting to have fun. I did commissions for years and there was a lot of stress with those because I had to please other people, of course, because they were paying me. And I did that for years. And now I just paint for me. I paint for fun. And that's how I like to paint. So I'm just going through all of these, using the side of my brush, not getting too picky, and even leaving some lighter areas, because we will continue to define some of these lines. And again, you know, what I love about watercolors is that transparency that they have. So beautiful, because you see these beautiful glazes that happen from layers of the different paint. Now I will tell you, as we get down to lower on our pine cone, I make the colors just a little bit darker. So there we go. Now my next layer, and this will dry pretty quick because it's a rather thin layer. So let's go in now with even a little bit darker color. And I'm going to be trying to just add more depth by that, adding some of those brush strokes of darker paint under a few of these, I guess, scales, you could call these. And we want the brush strokes all to lead towards the center of the pine cone. So for this one, I will use the burnt brown. I believe this would be like a burnt sienna or burnt umber in your Winsor Newtons. Just pick up a little bit more of that. There we go. So little darker value, meaning just a little bit more pigment. If you're not sure, you can test out. And I can say, yeah, that's the color I wanted. If you think you have too much water, now I can tell because I can see my brush is really swollen and fat. You can just tap off like that and get rid of some of that excess paint. So let's go ahead and go in and start adding some of that in. Now I don't want to color everything in like I did the first or second glaze. I want to kind of go in between and more towards the bottom of these little scales. Not sure what you call those. Because as my pine cone comes out, it definitely gets lighter. So I'm using darker and darker colors as I go towards the bottom of the scale. And I'm going to rinse my brush and I might just go in there, since I don't like those hard lines. And I'm just going up against those to soften those lines so they're not quite as harsh. That's just me. And then let's continue, pick up some more of that paint. We're almost, I was thinking about this, I'm almost painting in a negative painting style because I'm painting around the light pine cone areas, which is the tips of them. So I'm somewhat clarifying and distinguishing those by painting darker around them. And it, again, it creates that depth. It defines them. So go in, just keep picking up some of that lovely brown. And down here, this is definitely negative painting. I'm painting around my little pine cone tips. And also, watercolors will lighten when they dry. So keeping that in mind, if it seems like, wow, that's way too dark, they will lighten up. I'm also being aware of keeping these white spaces in there because I just don't want it to be all a solid painting. Tapping off my brush and going back in and softening those edges. So I don't have such a distinct line. I'll leave that one. This one's kind of dry, so it's not going to let me pick it up as easily. So there we go. Just a little bit, and you don't have to do that. That may be just me. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go in with my darkest brown. And that would definitely be the MeiLiang burned brown. Let's see here. Sometimes I mix up my paints here in my MeiLiang palette. I dumped them the other day, so they all fell out. So I think it's going to be this one. Yeah. I might even add maybe a little Prussian blue in there. I think could be really pretty. So let me take some of my brown and mix it with my Prussian blue. I think that could be really, really pretty because blue has an element of green to it since it's a secondary color made from blue and green. I'm sorry, blue and yellow makes the green. So I think a little bit of green in here or a little bit of Prussian blue with my brown would be really pretty. Now, when I'm using this last color, I'm going around, again, that negative painting, and I'm keeping in mind to use this more on the bottom here. I'm just going around because there's not a lot of area, but in these areas up here where I have more space and you can see more of the little individual pine cones, or I'm not sure what they call those. I think they're called scales. So I'm going into the bottom of them where they're in the depths of the pine cone, like that. And as the pine cone goes up, it gets lighter. Now, some of these areas where the pine cones, the scales are much closer, I'm just going in between them. But notice this beautiful depth that we're creating. And that is always, as you see me talk about all the time, that is really a skill to bring, a technique rather, to bring into your paintings to really level them up. I know me as a beginner, I didn't think about that. I just used a brown color through the whole thing. I didn't really think of values so much. So there we go. Now I'm going to go in and just lighten them a little bit. Just pick up a little bit of the sharp edges. You don't have to because pine cones are actually rather sharp edged. So this is just really a me thing. Some people really like those harder edges, and that is perfectly fine. That's your style. And there you go. I just kind of like everything to be a little bit washy. But look at that beautiful depth we're creating. It really pulls your eye into the center of the pine cone, I think. So I might add in just a tiny bit more, a little bit more of that brown with the Prussian blue. Maybe just a few more areas in here. Don't want to get too dark. Like that. There we go. As you can see, the layers do lighten up as they dry. There you go. Maybe just a tiny bit more right here. So I love that. Now I think what I'll do actually on this one, well, let's draw some of our fun little, I didn't do it on this one, but I'm going to let that dry a little bit and then go in with maybe some little fun pine coney type fronds. So I'm going to grab my 6 brush now because I want a thinner line. Oops, got a little drop. Loading my brush on the side, which I know can be hard, yes, because if your paints are small, it's hard not to put the tip in, but I will try and run along the sides because I always want to protect that beautiful tip. Okay, so I like that. Let's just draw a couple of these fun little sprigs coming out. Let's see. So my composition is, this is the focal point. Now I'm going to kind of come out in a radius like this. So let's start here. Very, very light touch. And just bringing these little sprigs out like that. And maybe another one here. As you notice, I just used a little bit darker value for interest. Which means just a little bit more pigment than paint. There we go. And we'll do the other side here. And I'm using such a light touch with my brush. And this is where it really will help you to practice those brush strokes that I share with you, so that you know exactly how much pressure you need to put on your brush in order to get that thin brush stroke. And I'm putting in actually kind of a few little rogue pieces. Meaning just I'm kind of getting fun and crazy with them. I'm going to add a little bit more pigment. So I'm not making these all perfect. There we go. I also don't want to get too busy. And then maybe we'll have one come out of the top here. So my composition is kind of like this. So I don't want to get too crazy. I want to stay within that shape, like that. And then how about if we add in a few berries? I've been dying to try this Daniel Smith color that one of you wonderful beginners showed me, and it's called Red Fuchsite Genuine. How about that? So let's just grab a little bit of that. And I'm going to put it on my palette. It looks like a warm tone, which we're using warms here. So let's just put that on my palette here and see what we got. Yeah, it's almost like a brick red, and it has some sparkles in it, which I really love. So let's just create a few little berries here and there. Okay. Now I really would like to change the value, so I'm going to make a little bit lighter value, meaning more water. And I can even do that where I wet my brush, tap it off on my towel, and then go in and create a little bit of a washiness around those bright reds. Go in with a little bit of my green, use the tip of my brush. And just connect these, and I do this while it's wet so that I get some of that blend. So just adding these in here and there, kind of drawing my eye around my painting. Now picking up some of that green for the little stem. To connect them all. There we go. So I quite like that. I think that's really pretty. The only thing I might add in here, and let me grab my bigger set of MeiLangs. And let's just play with a little bit of that gold metallic, and see what happens here. Just to put some very slight shimmer on this. Trying to be very subtle with this. But I think at the same time, that's really pretty. Just like that. And for me, these holidays are all about that shimmer and shine. I'm switching back to my 6 brush, and I'm going to go in and maybe just put a little bit darker wash over the top of those scales. Not too much, but a tiny bit. And I'm going to use my sienna because it has a touch of red in it. Just a little bit of orange in it. And let's just go over, because I think as we move down, they should be a little darker because they're underneath. we go. I'm just doing little swishes, nothing real crazy. And that gives me this feeling of moving down, and those bottom scales are kind of tucking in. And I think I'm pretty good with that. I think I may stop right here. Let's just maybe the little stemmy thing here, and maybe go in there just underneath with a little bit darker. Just to look like a little bit of shadow, something like that. There we go. So I think I should stop here. I don't want to overwork this. I want it to stay somewhat fresh. But there you go. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Grab my, in my community page, I gave you a link for a download for the drawing for this little pine cone. And then these you can just kind of add in yourself. I'll link this berry color. I want to do this before I go. I want to try a little bit different berry color. That's a little bit cooler, just meaning it's leaning towards the cool side of the color wheel. So this would be the cool side, the ocean colors. This would be the warm side. And those are a little bit brighter. Let's see if we go in with maybe that type of color. Like that a little bit better. Yeah, it's pretty. Maybe I can put some of that in there. Okay, I'm going to walk away, as I say. I tell my students that all the time, just walk away. All right, so there you go. I hope you enjoyed that and you will give it a try and just have fun. This would be a really pretty card, by the way. All right, everybody, I will link all of my items in the description if you're curious. And happy painting, and as always, let's just keep having fun. All right, thank you.